Hello.
Hello,
What's going
everyone.
on, guys?
How's
Welcome
it going?
back. Welcome back.
Welcome back to the podcast.
What do we have for us today?
What do we have for us today? We have the cycle of poverty. That's what we're
Oh,
gonna
very
tackle.
nice, very
Yes,
nice.
yes,
Okay.
we're gonna talk about poverty.
This will deal with some heavy topics then, huh?
It will. It will. It should.
Very, very cool. Let's ease into it then.
Okay,
Let's talk about what's new.
What is new? Mm, Again, work, school. I'm taking this internship, and
Uh-huh.
I'm mentoring this kid, and he's 6 years old, but I am very certain he has like hyperactive ADHD.
Okay.
And
He just can't
I'm
focus?
not in a position at all to diagnose
Yeah.
something like that. I'm not an expert, but he cannot focus. He cannot stay still. He has difficulty like managing his emotions. Like he'll get frustrated
Oh,
and start
okay.
crying.
Yeah, yeah.
He's fidgeting constantly. It's not like he has like problems staying still. He does, but he's also constantly moving, touching things, getting distracted.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, one of the funny things too is kids just are also
They
like
are
that when they're younger.
But
That's why there's the overdiagnosis
but
of
I have a
ADHD.
I have a good comparison because there's kids that are his age as well within the tutoring center.
That are not as bad.
No,
Oh, okay.
there is much more easier for them to stay focused and to stay still.
Yeah.
And that's what really got it for me, that he doesn't just like sit down and stares at something. He's constantly
sitting back in his
touching
chair,
things,
swinging around, yeah.
swinging his feet back and forth, his hands. Yeah,
It
and
was
when
a-
you give him sugar, it gets even worse. Oh man.
I saw this really funny video one time of like they showed a kid like a math tutorial video on how to do math problems. He's sitting there like not paying attention. He's kind of just moving back and forth. And then they show him like Star Wars, and he's literally like this,
Like-
totally focused, locked into the video. It's so funny.
You gotta do both.
'Cause that's how- that be-
those
that's how it
reels on
is.
Instagram where you have
Yes,
like Subway.
yeah.
You gotta do that with ADHD
Well, that's funny
kids.
because like there's like a lot of science fiction is so stimulating.
It is.
That's why a lot of ADHD people like science fiction.
Mm-hmm,
There's so much going on.
It is. It is. There is a lot going on. Yeah, it's kids that their levels of focus rely upon a higher stimulation environment.
Yeah.
Like you need a higher amount of stimulation to get.
It's almost like, yeah, you need all of that to help you focus on one thing.
Yeah,
better.
you need a lot of distracting things to help you quote unquote focus. It's really interesting. Really interesting. ADHD. Yeah, I asked his parent. Like I was like, has he been diagnosed? Like, do you guys know if he has ADHD? And he said the question has been raised, and I'm quoting him. So like I'm not the first person.
Okay.
I'm not the first person to tell him that his kid
You
has
got
ADHD.
Shakespeare over here talking to
That's
you.
that's what he said. I'm like, okay. Yeah.
That's funny.
All right. What about you? What's new for you?
Let's see. When was the last time we saw each other? Was it back? No, not. It was back in February.
I think. I think Saint
Was it
Saint
back in
Patty's.
February? Oh yeah, I saw
St.
you
Patty's,
then.
yeah.
Did we record the day before? 16th?
I don't remember if I don't think we did, or I don't remember honestly.
It's been
But
a
yeah, I
while.
think it was for Saint Patty's.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Nothing really new. I'm going to LA on Monday. I'm gonna go to some nice places. I'm gonna try Community Goods, Livia and James.
What
They're
are community goods?
two matcha spots. They're like the best two matcha spots in
Okay.
LA.
Okay. Yeah, he's obsessed with matcha these days.
I'm not obsessed. I've been on matcha for about a year and a half now.
He's a matcha boy.
I jumped on the train really early and it exploded all of a sudden recently. It's really funny because black people really set the standard for what is becoming popular or what becomes popular. I don't know. There's like a swagger that like they have that dictates so much of style and fashion.
To make matcha.
Yeah.
The
Well, because
matcha
yeah,
swagger.
there was the one black dude who made that TikTok and literally exploded after that.
Okay.
Everybody's using that sound on TikTok and stuff like that. But I have been already tapped in. Don't worry. Made a cocktail with it last summer, before it was
He
popular.
did. You made the matcha pit.
Yeah, I was a visionary,
Yeah. Yeah. He was ahead of a trend.
indeed. But hopefully, I'm also gonna get some clothes because I've kind of shrunk a little bit, so I need to get some more clothes.
Matcha clothes.
No, not matcha clothes.
I love matcha.
Lavender clothes. I've heard people say that I probably look good in pastel colors like that. So
Yeah. Yeah. Like the color of lavender, or
yeah, like lavender, like maybe a light blue. Yeah.
okay. Interesting. All right. Ready to get into it?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Educate me.
So, I took a sociology class last semester, and it was a writing course. And we had a final project in which we had to tackle a social issue. And then most of the social issues were around inequality. So I decided to focus on the feedback loop of poverty. Like how does poverty happen? What sustains poverty? What what are the barriers that stand between people escaping the cycle of poverty? So I focus on three different things, which that's what we're going to talk about today, which are education, housing, and ultimately crime.
Okay.
There's also a fourth variable, which is healthcare, that also plays into it, but we're not going to be focusing on that today because we already
That's
have a lot to
huge
cover
too.
with
I feel like
education. Yes, that's a big one too, healthcare.
that's enormous. Yeah. Because like I mean, if you get sidelined with it, like a large medical expense, it'll haunt you for the rest
Yeah.
of your life.
Well, and in general, not having since we're talking about that, well, we can tackle healthcare. Not having access to healthcare, like universal healthcare, means you have to have a good job in order to access those benefits.
Yeah.
Unless you're willing to pay out of pocket. If you live in a poverty scenario, you don't have money
You don't have the
to
option.
get
It's
that
not an option.
coverage that you need is not an option. So yeah, you can go through the American attempts for universal healthcare, which is Obamacare and a few others,
Medicare and
but that
stuff
only
here.
covers so many people. So you still
Yeah.
have a huge percent of the population left out. With
It's more of like it only covers a few people, a certain amount of people that are qualified.
the
So you
qualified, yes.
it really it pertains to, or it tries to get like the lowest level poverty people.
Yes.
So I know
Yeah.
I'm covered, but that's because I make like poverty amounts of money just because I'm in college. Like I just don't have the
Yeah.
time to work enough. But also I think it doesn't cover everybody. Like it's crazy because
Yeah,
I
there's-
don't think it'll cover you if you
that's-
make more than
yeah.
$30,000 a year.
Exactly.
So you're
That's
making barely more. That's still you're still kind of in poverty, but
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden you don't qualify for healthcare.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
So healthcare is huge, yeah, especially if you have to go to the doctor for any reason, or even if you don't have to go to the doctor. People without healthcare are less likely to go.
Yeah.
They just can't. They don't see it as an option, which is really important.
One thing that's very cool is the Fresno State Medical Center.
Yes.
There's been a few times where I've had some like asthma scares or like I've been just a little sick, and I go down there and they go give me all my stuff, and it's like I'm walking out with like 3 or 4 medications for like $60, and it's very very nice.
But this is also covered by the education aspect. Like you're a
Yeah.
person that has access to education that is going through
Yeah.
public education, so
And
you
then
have
I'm in a
access to that
position.
structure.
I'm in a position where I'm not paying tuition, but I'm in a position where I qualified to get into university and receive financial aid that covers my tuition,
Yes.
which enables me to go do that.
Correct. And you also live in the state of California, which highly, a lot of the tax money here actually goes towards funding and helping schools and education.
Education, yeah.
It's very different than other states that don't have as much money as California does and how their education looks differently. Which then brings us to our first point.
Education.
We could talk about education. Let's see how did somewhere. There we go. So I want to set, before starting the podcast, this idea of a positive feedback loop, which is a self-reinforcing cycle when an outcome strengthens the conditions that created the cycle itself. In other words, think about it as breastfeeding. And I was thinking about an analogy to it.
All right.
Breastfeeding is one of the only biological positive feedback cycles in humans because when the baby breastfeeds, the mother produces more milk.
Uh-huh.
The more the baby breastfeeds on it, the more milk is produced.
Sure.
That's the way, and that's why it's a positive feedback loop.
That's why the phrase like weaning them off is like getting them to stop.
Exactly. So once
Breastfeeding
the baby
so that you
stops
stop producing.
breastfeeding, exactly, you stop producing. That is different from a negative feedback loop. In a negative feedback loop, you could talk about sweating, right? So as your body warms up because you're exercising, you begin to sweat. Your body is relieving. It's trying to lose that temperature that you have
to
acquired.
cool you down.
That's a negative feedback loop, and it works on the idea of homeostasis. It's
Homeostasis,
maintaining an equilibrium. I say this to give people an example of what a positive feedback loop looks like and how this plays into poverty. So let's start with education. As we know, or maybe not, one of the biggest funding that public schools receive is through neighborhood taxes.
Oh, okay.
So the amount of property taxes that people pay within certain neighborhoods, that money goes directly into funding schools. What is the problem there is that wealthier neighborhoods, of course, have higher property taxes, so a higher amount of money goes into funding education.
Oh, I like, and I'm putting it together now in my mind because of like the super wealthy neighborhoods that I've known of. And it's like Southern California, you have like the
amazing schools, amazing
Sierra Canyon High
educators.
School,
You have like 3 different Olympic-sized
Calabasas
pools,
and stuff like
tennis
that. Those
courts.
those schools, you go to the school and stuff like that.
It looks like a university campus.
No, you go to the school and all the students' cars are like Porsches and like Lamborghini, the Uruses and stuff like
There's
that.
there's that.
Multiple Teslas, and those are just the kids' cars. But also, you go to like you see like the communities and neighborhoods nearby. These are like multi-million-dollar homes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's crazy.
So a study by this guy called Radon et al., like more people within the study, they found that students in the top 10% of income distribution, like on the top percent of wealth, they have way better educational outcomes than the ones in the lower 10%.
That figures, right?
Yeah, it makes sense, of course. People that acquire better education tend to have better educational outcomes. This is a huge correlation that you can find on neighborhoodscout.com. It's a page online that allows you to click into a zip code on any city in the U.S. So you go, for example, through Fresno, right? Let's say you click on North Fresno, right? Like River Park area, and it gives you the demographics of River Park area. And you can click into, I don't know, downtown Tower District. It gives you the demographics. What do you come to conclude? You look at the demographics of like high school graduation rates.
Okay.
Way higher percentage of high school graduation rates in the north side of town, the wealthy side, versus a middle or lower class neighborhood.
Yeah.
Then you look at the demographics, which is also huge. Like, what kind of people live within the north and, north and south sides of the city. So that's huge. We are making a correlation between income, neighborhood, which translates to like owning property, or being in a neighborhood that has higher value property and education.
It's really crazy too because when you look at Fresno itself, like one of the first things I had read about, or not read about, I was told when I moved here is don't go south of Shaw. And if you live here, you know that. Shaw is like this very big, busy street that cuts through Fresno. It's horizontal, so it goes east-west. And for the most part, north of Shaw is very safe. Again, it gets better the more north you go. But it's the opposite when you go south. So like it gets worse, it gets rougher the more south of Shaw that you go.
And
that's something that you're kind of told.
This is something that you see in, I want to say, most American cities, and this goes back to redlining.
Yep.
For those of you who don't know what redlining, income, neighborhood, which translates to like owning property, or being in a neighborhood that has higher value property and education.
It's really crazy too because when you look at Fresno itself, like one of the first things I had read about, or not read about, I was told when I moved here is don't go south of Shaw. And if you live here, you know that. Shaw is like this very big, busy street that cuts through Fresno. It's horizontal, so it goes east-west. And for the most part, north of Shaw is very safe. Again, it gets better the more north you go. But it's the opposite when you go south. So like it gets worse, it gets rougher the more south of Shaw that you go.
And
that's something that you're kind of told.
This is something that you see in, I want to say, most American cities, and this goes back to redlining.
Yep.
For those of you who don't know what redlining is, back in the beginning of the 20th century, so 1900s, 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, until it got banned in like I think it was the 70s or so. City developers created a map of the city, and they would redline, so circle, the areas that they considered not good for investment. So what happens with these areas? There's way less land developers building anything on those areas, way less businesses, way less economic like flow within those areas in the city. And then this translates into the areas of the city that we see now. I'm probably gonna show you a map of redlining in Fresno, and you can still see, from when it was redlined to nowadays, that those areas that were redlined are areas of low poverty these days.
Yeah, I mean,
And you can make that correlation with almost any developed American city.
it's crazy too because like American cities have been around for the most part. They've all been around a lot longer than the 70s. So that's why most cities are like that.
Yes, yeah, the foundation itself of American cities was upon economic segregation, and of course racial segregation, because economics and race is highly mixed, and like it's highly correlated in the U.S.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty big. So here's a statistic. In Fresno County, only 24.8 of residents hold a bachelor's degree.
It's low.
That is really
That's
low.
scary low.
Like a lot of people don't even graduate high school. And it's interesting. Again, you look at the the higher socioeconomical level neighborhood, and the expectation for most people is to go to college. It's not something that people like are pondering about when you're in
It's
a
like you're going to go to college.
you're going to go to college. Yeah, you're not just thinking like, should I go to college? Should I not? The expectation and the rule for most of those kids is like, yeah, I'm going to go to college one way or another. You go to a lower socioeconomical neighborhood, and the focus
It's
is
graduating high
graduating
school.
high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if we get you to graduate, for the people that do, and if you're really really good, we might think about sending you to college,
Yeah.
or giving you that opportunity.
And it's so crazy because I work in a position where I'm very fortunate to where I work with a lot of like not I don't want to say smarter kids, but I work with kids that have more opportunities. There's
Yeah,
a
more
at
resources.
Sunnyside there's a DA, which is Doctors Academy Avid, and there's CVS Avid, and but I work in regular Avid as well. But seeing these DA Avid kids, like I can tell that they're like a standard above like regular kids at that school, because they're talking about they're not even worried about graduating because they know they're going to graduate. They know they
Yep.
have all the stuff available for them to graduate. They're worried about like how is my financial aid going to kick in? They're checking all their financial aid to check to see if it's going to qualify for these schools and how much exactly like these kids are like seriously crunching numbers and contrasting and comparing across universities to see what's their better fit.
Yes.
And it's crazy because like I mean, in Sunnyside's they're like moderately. I get they're at moderately. It's like a moderate, medium like household income.
Yeah.
It's not super high, but it's not super low. But there's a lot of kids at that school that they're gonna struggle to graduate. They're just gonna struggle to get by. So just seeing that, it's crazy
Yeah.
to me.
There's
Just different opportunities in the same school.
I'm taking this developmental psychology class, and you see that one of the big factors, like correlational factors between cognitive development, proper cognitive development, a factor there is socioeconomical level.
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes. That's a big factor that's drawn into most like developmental outcomes. Is like, okay, did this kid, boy, girl, whatever it is, did this kid grow up in a higher socioeconomical level or a lower socioeconomical level? And based on that, that accounts for the certain percentage of their cognitive development.
Well, we talked about that last week too. Like even just your mom having to worry about income and like where her next
stress.
meal is. That's just the stress from that is going to affect you as a child.
Well,
and
and
as a human, it's going to affect you there.
And having educated parents means oftentimes educated people have a bigger word repertoire. They just know more words.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you measure the vocabulary of kids, and you can see that the kids in higher socioeconomical levels
They usually
have
they're a little
many
more
more words
articulate, yeah.
in their vocabulary than do lower socioeconomical level. It's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's a massive thing. But then this whole idea of education, where we live, what I'm saying, and like what the statistics will show is that depending on where you're born, depending on a zip code, a random 5-number digit, you already carry a lower or a higher
Likelihood.
chance or likelihood of succeeding or having a better educational outcome.
Yeah. Now there are outliers like you and me, where you were born
Yes.
in Colombia and I was born in San Diego, and
Yeah, of course.
somehow we're both in
there
Fresno.
are outliers for everything, and
Yeah.
it's interesting because you talk about this, and some people will say, "Oh, but I know like my uncle's son, like they grew up in a poor area,
Yeah,
and
but
he is
you
going to
have to
Harvard."
remember-
It's like, yeah, but this is not the rule. This is an exception to the rule.
You have to remember that like usually people like that are not very smart because they think exceptions create the standard,
Create the standard, yes.
and that's a very low.
That's
level
called the availability heuristic, where
Yeah.
you take
That's
the
like a very
information that's not
low-level
available
thinking.
and you make assumptions based upon it.
Yeah.
Yes. So this whole idea of where you're born, where you live, changes your educational outcomes. Then we have to worry about neighborhoods, like where is it that you live, right? And then this takes us back to home ownership, housing. So, throughout the history of America, home ownership is often seen as a key of financial stability. But wealth inequality makes it really difficult for those people in the lower socioeconomic levels to ever attain a home. In Fresno, the median home value is lower than the state average, and yet it's still unaffordable for a lot of people here. Like houses in Fresno, if you come from the Bay Area or almost from anywhere else in California, are cheap,
Yes.
relatively
Oh,
cheap.
yeah. That's why there's a lot of
There's a lot
transplants.
of people moving to Fresno, right? But you still have around 18% of the Fresno residents living below the poverty line. This is much higher than the national average, which I think sits at about 10 to 11%.
It's crazy because it wasn't last summer. I think it was 2 summers ago. I was looking at getting into a home, like trying to buy a home with like my parents and stuff like that out here, just so like they could expand their assets. But also I have like a home,
Yeah, you have
right?
a place you're not just wasting
And
all
it's
of your
crazy.
income
We
in
were going to
rent.
Tower District, which we've talked about, which is not a great neighborhood, but also even like more south of Fresno.
I think
And some of those,
Tower is a great neighborhood in Fresno. I
there's
love
nothing
Tower
wrong with
District.
Tower, but it's a lower income neighborhood.
It is, it is.
But like those, even those areas, we were like seeing some really shoddy houses for like three, sometimes almost $400,000.
Yeah, it's
That's
insane.
super expensive.
And it's a house that needs a lot of work done.
It's
And
like it's a fix. It's like you're showing up. This is the house that is a fixer upper. This is a house where you're like near crime. Like yeah, there's already a fence outside, um, and it's like oh my goodness, like that's already asking so much. But also a big thing with Fresno, like you talked about, there's a lot of transplants coming from the Bay Area. There's also a bunch of invest. There's like I don't remember exactly what they're called, but there's like a crap load of people here that are buying up all the houses, and it makes it really competitive and hard to buy houses for even the regular folks that want
it
them.
is, it
So
is. So there was this report from the National Low Income Housing Coalition, and it talks about how millions of low income households will spend over half of their income on rent. You know, there's this whole rule with like rent that you should
yeah, you
only spend
shouldn't
like less than one third of your income in rent
up
if
to
you're
yeah
trying
30%.
yeah 30% of your income should be spent in rent so you can use the rest to save money and invest and do all these things. When you're spending over half of your income in rent, then you got to think about groceries, gas, and all these things.
Health insurance,
Health insurance, if you can even get health insurance. The problem here is that people are living on a month to month basis,
paycheck to paycheck.
paycheck to paycheck. And this idea of living paycheck to paycheck, especially at a lower socioeconomic level, completely, not completely, but highly restricts your ability to earn and to accumulate wealth.
Yeah,
You
it's
just don't have a chance to save money.
and like I mean, there's been some dry months for sure where I'm like, okay, I just need to get to next week, and then I can get this, and then I can finally go grocery shopping, and then we can eat. You know,
Yeah, this
and
doesn't
it's crazy.
translate, and this also translates to middle income, like
Okay, yeah.
and then also higher income people. Like there's people that live in their big mansions and they have those 3 cars and they're still living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, because they also have all those things that
They
they're
also
paying
have all
for.
those things to pay for. Yeah, this is not only exclusive to lower socioeconomical level, but it highly affects and it mostly affects lower socioeconomical level households and families. So if you cannot purchase a home, you have to pay rent. If you have to pay rent and you're also in a lower socioeconomical level, you will be paying rent
A lot.
in a district. A lot of your money goes to rent, but you will be paying rent in a district in a zip code that also has lower access to education or
And other
quality
other
education.
other things as well. Because I'm not a good example because I live in a good area. But if you didn't live in a good area and you have to you're spending like a fair amount of money on rent. What if you have to go grocery shopping and there's no grocery store
Yeah,
that's
a food
nearby?
desert.
Yeah. So what if there's not something that's nearby, or what if you want to go? What if you need to go to like school and going to school for you, you have to get on the freeway to go to school.
Yeah,
Like that's other downsides of that as well. So
yeah. So these are two of the variables that create a positive feedback loop. So far, we know that again, poverty leads to lower socioeconomical education. Not having an education then means that you're most likely to stay in a cycle of poverty. And what really holds these two things together and glues them together is housing. If you spend most of your money on rent, which means you cannot own a property, you will never be able to accumulate enough money to purchase something and to actually start accumulating wealth. Now, think about this as generational. Generations and generations and generations of people living and paying rent instead of owning a home. That's why they say that the biggest one thing a person can do to start accumulating wealth is home ownership.
Yeah.
It's the key
100%.
is the key towards acquiring generational wealth, and it remains true in American society
I
today more than ever, right?
I tell my kids all the time, not my kids. I tell the kids that I work with all the time. Um, I stress it. I'll like pound on the table and I'm talking to them. I'm like, guys, the best thing you guys can do is become educated because they're already in a position where they're basically being spoon fed into Fresno State. Just because like the community here has really good terms with the university, they're basically being like spoon fed pushed into Fresno State. So they're already gonna get like I think there's called something. I think it's called Bulldog Bound, where like high school students get accepted into Fresno, like pre-accepted into Fresno State as like freshmen in high school.
Yeah.
As long as it's like as long as you pass high school, you'll get into Fresno State.
Yeah.
So they have this opportunity, and I tell them like the best thing you guys can do is get educated because
I know,
that sets you up for so much more
Fresno
success.
Fresno State is perhaps the cheapest, if not
No, it
one
is.
of the
It's the
cheapest.
cheapest CSU.
CSU, yeah.
It's one of the cheaper universities in California, but also like it's like the longer I'm here, it's criminally underrated. Like this is such a good school.
I
The
would
people
I
that I've
would
met in
completely agree.
so many
For
different
for how
fields
much
is
money
ridiculous.
you're paying to go for it, and how much Fresno State values the idea of raising the community. Because the point of really Fresno State, and I've come to realize that, is to raise the community.
Yeah, yeah.
Is to get more people to go through college, push them through college so they can acquire a degree. Like, it really does, an amazing job at doing that and then centering upon that. It's not a
And
university of
that's the
like,
thing, too.
it's not a university that just wants the smartest people to have like the smart, the best record in academia. No, they just want to raise people out of poverty.
And that's another thing too, is like there's so many kids that I talk to about when I try telling them getting educated, and I talk to them and I'm like using these different words, and they're like, "Oh, you're kind of corny, huh?" Like it's kind of weird that you're so excited about this. Like, there's nothing wrong with being excited about
Yeah.
being educated.
It's
It's
called-
not corny to care. Caring about your education is also caring about your life. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I talk-
That's something that you should be ecstatic and excited for.
Yep, I would talk about this in terms of intellectual curiosity, and that's a trait that some people have and some people
don't
just
have
don't. It's the constant in the in other terms you could also talk about it as a learning mentality or as a growing mentality.
Oh, yeah, growth
where
mindset.
you're a growing mindset when you're constantly thinking upon learning, because the more you learn, the more you realize what you don't know.
Yeah. Who was it? Somebody said something. The more I learn, the more I don't know.
Yeah.
That's like a quote from somebody, right?
Yeah, it's a big thing in philosophy. I only know that I know nothing, sort of. But
The
yeah,
more I know, the more I realize I know nothing. Oh, Socrates.
Socrates, yeah.
The
Socrates
Socratic
was
paradox.
really, yeah, he was
I know that I
really
know nothing.
he was really he focused a lot upon knowing, the differences between like knowing and being. It was so interesting. But yeah, that is Socrates.
We always get back to philosophy somehow.
I know. I was watching this lecture by this guy, and he was talking about like Socratic philosophy and like his contributions towards it. So interesting. It's a whole different concept, but whatever. So this takes us to another, to the third variable that I wanted to focus on within my research paper, and this is crime. So it might be a surprise to you that areas of lower socioeconomical level experience more crime. You can look this up on the internet. You can look up crime rates according to neighborhoods in different cities. And if you look at the demographics of those neighborhoods, they tend to be lower socioeconomical level. What happens here? It is that, and I want to talk about maybe like a ground case perspective where you grow up in a lower socioeconomical neighborhood that experiences a lot of crime. Who are your role models within that neighborhood?
Oh.
You know, when all of you see, and like you see a lot of people doing different crime, like whether it's battery assault, I don't know, drug dealing,
Domestic
gangs,
violence.
domestic violence. Who are your role models? And I feel like that's a huge influence on kids and kids'
The
perspectives.
lack of role
The
models is
lack of
the
role
bigger
models
problem. Yeah.
completely. So a lot of these kids don't have their uncle who may be a university professor, or their dad who's an engineer, or their mom who's an accountant, or I don't know, a psychologist. They just don't have that structure of education around them that would otherwise propel them towards getting an education.
Yeah, and like we all know, like kids, children from like what ages, as long as they're as soon as they're conscious to like 10 years old, they're like sponges. Everything that they
Yeah.
see, they directly follow or like do in their life. So like depending on like how your relationship with your parents was and how your parents' relationship was is going to dictate how you are in relationships initially, until you can either learn to fix that or learn to work on however you better you want it. But also like the eating habits that you develop too, and the eating habits that you see other people have like in your household, that's how you're going to develop as well, until you learn to better it or worsen it or whatever. So like when you're a kid, you're a sponge, and like if you don't have role models, or if you don't have good
Or if
role
you
models.
exactly if your role models are drug dealers and
Yeah,
gang
exactly.
members,
If
and
the if you don't have if you don't have good role models or the lack thereof, that's gonna dictate a lot about you.
that is highly going to influence the way you think and the way you perceive the world.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there's big correlations here. I wrote something about, for example, in the Tower District, since we've talked about that, which it's a lower socioeconomical area, unfortunately, and it reports that 56% of children within the Tower District live in poverty. This is a rate much higher than the national average, and this high poverty correlates with, of course, elevated crime levels in these neighborhoods. Then you have neighborhoods like Sunnyside in Fresno, which is it's a middle class neighborhood, and it has of course lower poverty rates, which is around 28.2 for children, and of course
Almost.
they
That's like
experience less
half
crime.
less, 50% less
Yes.
than what you than Tower District.
So neighborhoodscout.com, again, I keep referring that to that webpage because I drew a lot of my conclusions from their statistic uh, breakdown of zip codes. And it shows you that Fresno's violent crime rate is 44 per 1,000 residents, which is insanely higher than the national average of 4 per 1,000 residents.
That's a lot.
This is a
Mountains
huge
more.
correlational sort of evidence of how socioeconomic disparities amplify crime in struggling communities.
And the reason we talk about Fresno, if you haven't been able to pick it up already, we live here in Fresno. Obviously, you could draw your own conclusions with other cities and other that on your own, but we're putting a lot of time and effort into our city because this is our community and this is where we live and this is
It
what
is
we
indeed.
represent currently.
I,
So
I will say though that it takes people coming outside of Fresno to truly speak of this from an outside perspective.
Yeah.
Because if you've grown in Fresno your whole life, this is all you know. You have no
yeah,
comparison point. By living somewhere else, by moving into Fresno from a different city, you can truly see the
how bad it
inequalities
is.
and how bad it is in a lot of ways. I didn't want to use that word, but yeah, it's
I mean, it's
having
not a
it's
good
having
thing.
a
You have
different
to be aware of that.
yes, it's having a different experience to compare. And this is why I tell a lot of people that one of the best ways to broaden your mind and really open it up is travel.
Yeah.
And not just like go to Italy on a 2 week vacation. Actually move somewhere else. Go somewhere else within the US. It's not that hard.
Super deja vu right now. I know we've literally had this exact same train of thought in
What?
another episode. Crazy
Oh.
deja vu right now.
Tres deja vu,
Yeah.
yeah. Traveling is huge.
One of the huge things, because when I first moved to Fresno, I lived on student housing like a block away from the university, but funny enough, south of Shaw, but just barely. And this is so funny. The first week that I moved in, there was a shooting at the apartment complex.
Nice.
And somebody died right
It's
out
like,
front.
welcome, Gabe.
Yeah. So I was like, oh crap. And I remember I had texted my partner at the time, and she's like, oh, you're gonna really regret living out there. And I never got in any trouble out there. Nothing ever happened to me. But what the difference is when I have moved to where I currently live, which is I don't know, maybe
It's a
like
nice area of
maybe like a
town.
mile and a
You're-
half more north. The difference was great. What really opened my eyes was I was coming home from somewhere at like 8, 9 at night, and there was 3 high school girls just walking around like walking on the side of the road, just hanging out, and I'm like, that's crazy. They're gonna get in
Yeah.
trouble. And no, like every week I would, because I had the same routine for a while. Every week
Yeah.
I would see them out walking out, and I'm like, oh, it is much better to. It's like more acceptable to do that there, because like you don't have to worry about anything. And I see small dainty girls walking their little dogs at like 9, 10 at night, and it's like you just have the luxury of that because you live in a better area.
You
You have
do.
to worry about less.
You do, especially again, if you want to talk about like gender differences and the perceived levels of safety and security, it is much harder for women,
Oh, of course.
regardless of where they are, to actually have the granted
So,
freedom.
I mean,
of
yeah,
going for a walk.
them being out there speaks volumes for
Yeah.
how much safer it is. Because like even me, when I get off of work at like 2 or 3 a.m., I don't even feel safe alone walking. Sometimes most of us coworkers, like there'll be 4 or 5 of us, and there's of course there's girls. We have to make sure we walk them to their car because there's been break-ins and there's weirdos that are out there. Even us guys, we walk each other to our cars. It
Yeah.
is just so much rougher in Tower
I
to the point
I-
where nobody should be alone.
I will say having moved to Fresno really got me thinking about inequality. Because I grew up in Bogota, which is it's unequal as well as any other country. Third world inequality works a little different, poverty and everything else. But it's a city where you have like nice areas, not so nice areas. One nice area here, not here. 2 blocks this way, it's nicer. Here it's not. Miami is also very similar. Like you have a nice area here, not here, here, not here. As you go south, it doesn't get as nice. It's a mix, right? Seattle also very similar, but Fresno is a city where, for how small it is, you drive 10 minutes out on the freeway and you're in a completely different world.
The differences are polarizing. They're
Polarizing
just
differences. You know how
huge. Yeah.
at the beginning of this episode you talked about Shaw as that line.
Yeah.
And that's what really got me thinking about inequality and poverty, is that how you can have this huge line in a city that divides the wealth from the lack of wealth. It's much more evident.
It's really unfortunate too, because funny enough, some of the best places to eat are south of Shaw.
Yep.
It's so
it's,
funny.
It's more ethnically diverse, which is the other thing about the poverty in America. It's so sad because this is not just a difference in poverty, but it's this difference in poverty and wealth is also highly tied to ethnic background.
and race and racism and,
And-
stuff
and,
like
you know-
that. Like I was just talking at work the other day about I don't remember I'm gonna paraphrase here, but somebody said, "Oh, MSG is bad for you," but I keep stressing this point: MSG is not bad for you. The problem with MSG came when in the 30s and 40s, when a lot of like it has like a lot of racist ties that MSG is bad for you because a lot of Asians are bringing that in, and the people in the U.S. were like everything that they bring over is bad, and along with everything that was going along with World War I and World War II, of course they're going to say that's bad, and it's like a bunch of racist propaganda that's pushed, so that it eventually hopefully like squeaks out and it's no longer talked about. But MSG is actually not bad for you. Let me see if I can find it.
What is MSG? Sorry.
It's a flavor enhancer. Controversy.
What?
So okay, the term MSG is a flavor enhancer that's commonly used in processed foods, soups, canned vegetables, and restaurant dishes. It's made from sodium and L-glutamic acid, an amino acid that occurs naturally in foods like tomatoes, mushroom, and cheese.
That was
MSG
that was
is
really
used to
fast. I'm gonna have to add like subtitles.
Sorry. MSG is used to intensify savory flavors and create a unique taste called umami. It's sprinkled into foods like table salt. MSG is generally considered safe, though some people may experience temporary reactions like hives, sneezing, or nasal congestion. I mean, that doesn't really happen ever, right? Controversy around MSG. The term Chinese restaurant syndrome was coined in the New England Journal of Medicine, but lacked scientific basis and fueled anti-Asian xenophobia. See, that's what I'm talking about. Is this like this propaganda was pushed out? There's nothing wrong with it. It's a bunch of it's like racist propaganda, and that's the thing. It's like those are things that are like rooted in American
exactly.
standards and traditions
And-
that are like that further pushes the minorities down. Like this isn't even
Yeah.
like a huge
We live.
Asian thing. Like a lot of cultures use this, but
Yeah.
this is one way that they keep minorities down with just something as simple as a flavor enhancer.
We live in a country. We unfortunately live in a country of inequality, but it's also a country of racial, economical inequality.
Yeah.
So there's so many layers to the whole aspect of poverty. Yeah, it's unfortunate that we live in a first world country, and the United States is one of the first world countries with the highest rates of inequality. And I highlight the idea that it's a first world country because people will compare like, oh yeah, well we're so much better than like I don't know a random country in South America or Africa. I'm like, well yeah, those are third world countries. I mean, those are countries that are still
And
developing. For the U.S. to be a developed country, to have such a massive gross domestic product, and to have so many billionaires and so much money, and yet still we have not tackled the cycle of poverty.
yeah, it's so funny because remember when our friend from Denmark came over and we
Yes.
were like grilling her with questions and stuff like that. Like, oh, how are things there? How is this and this and that? One thing that I feel like we forgot to ask her is in Denmark they do 1 week on, 1 week off, where you work a week and then the next week you have off,
Yep.
and then you work a week and the next week you have off. So that's one thing, right? But we were also talking to her about like how is shopping over there. We talked about
Food.
the prison system.
Prison
Remember
system
that?
is huge. Yeah.
We talked about food and stuff like that, which that was more of like for us to be funny because like they have less going on over there. But that's another first world country, but that's a first world country that doesn't deal with the third world
And
problems
they
that we do.
experience a much lower rate of crime.
Absolutely.
And again, you talked about the prison system. That's another thing that feeds into the poverty cycle. The way we've talked about this before in our podcast. The way we treat criminals as non-humans, almost like you're a criminal, you'll always be a criminal. If you do something wrong, you get a criminal record. Guess what happens when you have a criminal record? Good job getting an education and getting a good job after that. Good job, good luck earning more money than you would otherwise.
And one of the funny things is like a lot of the structures built in the American society. That's why I say they're like almost third world problems because you still have issues like in third world countries
You
like
do.
Nigeria and
You
Lagos
have
and
you
South
have
Africa,
the same
where they
issues
deal
that you
with
have in developing countries.
yeah,
Like,
when they deal with they're still dealing with apartheid, which is like legalized racial segregation, where we had that for so long, and it's still the system is still kind of set up like that.
It is.
And that's something that they're dealing over there in a third world country, and that just once again it just shows volumes for where the condition that the U.S. is in. So
It is. I would completely agree, and it makes me sad that I don't know a lot of the values that the United States stands for verbally are not really the same values that you can see once you go out into the into the ground experience of what it
yeah,
is to live in America. Yeah,
it's unfortunate.
it is really
But that's why
unfortunate.
like we stress getting educated, becoming aware about this stuff. It helps a lot because it opens your eyes to these things. It
And
makes you aware, even though it's something uncomfortable to talk about. It makes you aware about it, and it kind of helps you learn about what you can do to help, how you can hopefully jump social classes. That's what we're looking to do,
yeah.
as well as help out as well. You know,
So, while Fresno County illustrates, the positive feedback loop of poverty, which, in conclusion, limited access to affordable housing diminishes wealth accumulation. Underfunded educational systems in low-income neighborhoods restrict upward mobility, and elevated crime rates in economically disadvantaged areas further destabilize communities and maintain the status of poverty. Together, these variables sustain and deepen the systemic economic disparities, perpetuating the cycle of poverty across generations. Wealth inequality in America, it's a long-term issue with intense consequences for crime, homeownership, and education. And I would want to say this, looking at it on a good note or a hopeful idea, is that this is something I've sort of learned from learning about behavioral psychology, and is that if we seek a different outcome, we must focus on changing the circumstances that lead towards that outcome.
is that
Translated into terms of poverty, if
is that
we
not just CBTing ourselves?
that could be CBT, yeah. But if we want to really tackle the cycle of poverty, we need to tackle the circumstances that lead and sustain this positive feedback loop of poverty. And then what are those, right? So, by providing people perhaps with universal health care, that will take a huge load off of their economic, stress. by providing people with affordable housing, by providing most of the population with an ability to own some sort of home or apartment or whatever you want to call it. Just owning a place to live can raise people out of poverty.
And that's one thing that's good too. Is right next to where I live. I'm sure you've seen the building they've been doing for a while.
Yeah.
So that's actually like it's not affordable housing, but I know it's considered semi-affordable housing. But when I tell you the madness that went down for people trying to get in there, because what they do is
Yeah, it's
they
a
like
lottery.
it's a lottery. They like they have you apply, and then based off of your income. Everybody's rent there is different, so they prorate your income based off of how much you make, how many people will be living with you there, as well as other factors and stuff like that. Whether you're in school, where you work, and stuff like that, which is crazy. That's also really good, but it doesn't require that much work on the back end. By
It is really good, and it doesn't require a lot of work, indeed. But the availability of places like that are minimal
Yeah,
compared to the amount of people that need them.
exactly. And I mean, I live in a good area, and that's right next to me. So I mean, like now you are now there's gonna be kids moving into those apartments that are able to go to really, really good middle schools and really good high schools that are gonna put them in a position to go to Fresno State or shoot, maybe even go to like UCLA. Who
Exactly.
knows?
So if we change the circumstances that lead people towards not graduating high school, like home ownership, crime, if we change the circumstances, if we give everyone a fair shot at acquiring education, we can curve the poverty cycle. Like
Yeah.
so oftentimes in society the answer is really there, is more about the willingness of the society itself or the government to make these changes.
Yeah.
Because what does it mean to provide universal healthcare? It means essentially destroying the privatized business of healthcare.
Exactly.
That doesn't match that doesn't match with the capitalist model of profit, because you're essentially destroying the ability to make profit in order to make people's lives better. What happens with affordable housing? The housing developers are gonna make way less money because they have to also implement affordable housing.
Yep.
It's sadly it's an issue that is the answer is there. It's more about how we get there, and are we willing as a society to advocate to get there.
It's a long, hard road.
It's a long, hard road.
One
So-
of the things I wanted to mention too is well, because I work at the high school, it is college acceptance time, so these kids are starting to get into universities, and one thing that blew me away is these kids are getting into universities that are one really good, but there was this girl that walked up, and then they do have this like whole program that they do. They like print out T-shirt like papers, and then on the T-shirts it's like a picture of the logo of the schools they got into. This girl goes up, she's like, "Oh, I got into Fresno State. I got into UCI. I got into UC Merced." And you know the last one that she did? She's like, "Yeah, I got into John Hopkins." You know how hard it
Good,
is?
yeah.
That's like the number 1 medical school in the U.S.
That's
That's incredible. She literally said that, and the other tutors it didn't like blow them away like it blew me away, because I think they just don't know. They're not like
Yeah, they don't understand what job
the
Hopkins
level
is.
of like prestige getting
do you
into
know-
John
do you know
Hopkins
who-
is. I was like, whoa! I
Do-
was like losing my mind in there, and she looked at me. She's like, I think she
Yeah.
she probably realized like I was the only one who understood. I was like, that is incredible.
Yeah.
Getting into there.
Do you know who Ben Carson is?
It sounds familiar.
He's a neurosurgeon.
Oh, no.
Graduated from
John
John Hopkins, and he was the first person to split two twins that their heads were
conjoiners
fused together.
Okay.
And he performed a surgery where he split him. He's brilliant.
Crazy.
He was a brilliant neurosurgeon.
And that just goes to show like how good of a program. He may have been able to do that regardless, but I will say like the opportunities that you get going to university like that sets you up for
Yeah,
more
education,
success.
education, and home ownership are huge towards accumulating wealth.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been knowing this. We've known that home ownership again is the best way to start accumulating wealth, and getting educated furthers and like enhances your opportunity to earn money and to own a home eventually.
Yeah.
So if we as a society provide people with the opportunity of home ownership and the opportunity of universal education, we can make a serious change upon the conditions of poverty.
Yeah. So I mean,
And
this is
this is very like me being highly enthusiastic and,
Yeah.
and positive about the positive outcome of changing these circumstances.
and education is education is not always going to school. Education can be just reading. Education can be just like watching videos. There's many different forms of education. One of the things that I credit a lot of my creativeness and I don't want to say that I'm super smart, but one of the things that helps me pick up on things in school very easily is I read so much as a kid, and you read about these
Yeah.
simple
So
concepts in
you
like children's
you
books and
created
like books that teach you about things in life. Like you reading about Hunger Games and dystopian societies, right? And then it literally goes to show you about all the things wrong in our society. And it normalizes them in those books, but it goes to show how crazy it is. But it kind of is like it's like a breadcrumb of how things are
yeah,
really in society.
and what's
And it
interesting,
helps with the pattern recognition
yeah,
too.
from like a cognitive perspective, from like a cognitive psychology perspective, um, learning about something makes further learning about it easier. So learning generally about a lot of different concepts then makes it much easier for you to learn
'Cause you can draw
individually. So
comparisons.
what you're creating is you're creating a larger semantic web
Network,
within your
yeah.
network within your brain, right?
Yeah.
So once you do that, once you acquire a lot of different knowledge about all of these general things, it's much easier for you to acquire knowledge and specify the knowledge on all of those things you've learned. So learning a little bit about biology, or I don't know, human biology, anatomy, learning a little bit about rock formation, then it makes it much easier if you're, I don't know, getting into geology
Yeah,
as a
like
major or getting into
one thing that's really
medicine.
funny is learning about biology, right? Like, say for example, you learn about bees, and you know how bees make their honeycomb. They make their honeycomb in hexagons.
Yeah.
But then that also helps with geology, because if you look at geological structures, I don't know if this is going to be kind of a reach here, but Devil's Postpile. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
They're literally like it's these formations
Hexagons
of
of rocks.
hexagonal like piles of rock that have formed naturally,
Mm-hmm.
and those are both two naturally occurring things separate from each other, and you can draw that comparison.
We see a lot of
And it's because it's like an ergonomic, efficient way for things to be structured.
exactly. We see a lot of the same patterns across species
Yeah.
and across phenomena in nature, which is really interesting. That's why, and this is going on a tangent, but that's why we have realized that we did not invent mathematics as humans. We discovered mathematics.
Math. I mean, when they send out, I don't know if I told you this. When they send out messages trying to reach other, I don't know, aliens. I guess
Yeah,
they usually
species.
send math problems in some form. They usually send like some messages in math, because math is a universal
It's a
language.
universal language. Yeah,
Because you have to know math. I mean, we're doing math literally every time we're doing stuff. Your brain is doing the math to grab this, because you have to calculate how much pressure to put in to turn on your screen and where exactly to grab your computer and stuff like that. All that is math. You just don't see the numbers in your head.
So yeah, back to poverty, I guess. How do you
We went
we
out.
went on a tangent, yeah. How do you feel about this? Like now that you have perhaps a little more information about the cycle of poverty.
I mean, the issues are glaring, but it's not a problem that can be solved in one generation.
Nope.
Unfortunately,
Nope.
this is gonna take decades, if not centuries.
It could take a long time to reverse what has been
And honestly, if I'm being
the
honest,
norm.
like this is something that may not even be fixed within the United States of America. This is something that may need to be
fixed at a global scale.
no,
No?
like this may be like I mean, obviously, different countries have different phases of like not phases, but like different phases of like how governments are ran. Maybe this is just like this can be fixed in another phase of like
Of
whatever
capitalism, like
maybe
post-capitalist
yeah,
society
maybe
might be able to tackle the poverty cycle.
I don't know. Shoot.
We will see, or maybe we won't, because we're not gonna live that long to see it. But yeah,
I don't plan to live that long.
I guess a good takeaway from this is
Get educated.
try to beat the odds of whatever circumstance it is that you're in, and get educated.
If you wanted to go back to school, take this as the push to you should go back to school.
Not only
If you want to
will
read that book, go read that book.
not only will education, of course, propel your chances of making more money throughout your lifetime, but education also allows you to talk about really cool stuff in really abstract concepts like what we do here.
Yeah, with really cool people. And
With really cool
we're given
people.
a great opportunity
And
because
and education also allows you to meet amazing people.
Yes.
It allows you to meet intellectuals alike. There's so many, and there's been a lot of studies on the difference between, like, the cognitive difference between educated people and non-educated people.
Uh-huh.
It's huge.
there's something so cool about talking to someone in a class that about something that you guys are both interested in that's not relevant to the class. That's
Yep.
still like an academic topic, because all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's like so much dopamine is being flooded into your brain when
It
that
is.
happens, because it's like, wow, this is something somebody is equally educated about something different, and it's just so super
Yeah.
super cool.
I will say I really enjoyed taking AP classes back in high school, even though I didn't really take a lot of them, because I felt that I was finally in a group of intellectual alike people.
Yeah.
And I really liked that. I took AP literature back in
Okay.
senior year, and it was so cool just being surrounded by a group of people that were also interested and smart. I was like,
Yeah, like that
yes.
also like reading and
That
stuff like
also
that.
like reading, yeah, and that also have just a good semantic web of knowledge in their brain.
And
That,
the
I
thing
love
too
that.
with like literature also is like you also have to like dig deeper than the surface level words.
It's a lot of abstract thinking.
Yeah, you have to actually dig into the topics of
Mm-hmm.
the literature and dig out the hidden meaning and stuff. You know?
Indeed, indeed, indeed. So, guys, study, get educated. You may never be able to own a home, but you can be educated. Like the housing is kind of hard to tackle now.
But if you're educated, you're setting up your children for success.
Yes, so they
Even if you
maybe can own a home one day.
Even if you don't own a home, you'll know where to send them. You'll know what to do to better prepare them. And you know what? The best thing that you can do is die a good death.
That what?
Yeah,
That die an educated death?
No, by dying a good death, because what happens, right, is your kids are in a good position and they can set you up. And you can live a nice, lavish, comfortable death.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
Like I'm gonna be like my parents have went through it. They're not as educated, but they set me up for success. So I know when it comes their time, they're gonna be living posh, nice lifestyles. Right,
Exactly.
up until they're knocking on death's door.
It is. It is. It is true. I mean,
Not
educating
that they're gonna
yourself
die
and
anytime
educating
soon.
your
They're
kids
so young.
means that at some point, ideally, your kids will take care of you as a parent.
Yeah.
Even though this is a value that's been disappearing in societies in general, but it's a really important value.
Agreed.
It's a really important value. So thank you guys for tuning into our
Wait,
podcast.
we're not done.
We're not done. I
our
hope you learn about education.
our MMM today. What are we
Oh,
gonna
the MMM, the MMM. Okay, what do you have, Gabe?
Music,
More
media.
Pokemon cards?
do? Nah, not
No
today.
Pokemon cards?
A new set came
Aw,
out,
come
but
on.
one thing which one do I want to talk about? Should I? Have you seen The Boys?
Yes.
Have you seen Invincible?
Yes.
Have you
haven't-
watched the new of the
I
Invincible?
stopped. I
Which
stopped
ones did I-
watching The Boys in a bit. A couple, like one season ago. But I
Let's all
haven't
talk
watched
about
the
The
new.
Boys.
I haven't watched the new Invincible.
So The Boys is really good because it's a socio-political. I don't think I've talked about this yet.
It's a social political.
It's a social political commentary about a lot of things that happen in the U.S. And the first season kind of introduces you to the fact that superheroes are a common thing in society and how they're they're kind of like celebrities and they're made these idols, but in reality they also have their flaws and stuff like that. But it gets really like the fourth season gets really dark because it talks about like superhero issues, but as well as like underlying racial undertones, which
Underlying
are really
racial
crazy.
structures, yeah.
And it's like it's gory, it's bad. Like it's rated R for every reason that it can be rated R. But if you watch it with an open mind, you will really like it. I like the first episode's so good because like I don't want to spoil too much, but the first season's so good.
It is.
The first episode's amazing. Within the first 10 minutes, you're like, what the flip is happening? It's crazy.
Indeed, indeed.
But yeah, it's on Amazon Prime. It's free. Amazon Prime's not free, but it's free on Amazon Prime. And there's 4 seasons, so you could binge it in like a month and be done. You could be tapped in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can binge it.
Next episode, I expect everybody watching to be all caught up on The Boys.
Yes, we're gonna spoil you guys.
Yeah, because we're gonna spoil everything next episode. Or yeah, next episode we'll spoil everything.
So yeah, again.
And the spinoff Gen V. The spinoff Gen V.
Gen
Have
V?
you watched that one?
No.
It's a spinoff of. It's actually about college kids that are superheroes.
Okay.
It's in between season 2 and 3 of The Boys. Also very interesting, but deals with more sexually suggestive themes because they're college
Yeah,
kids.
college, yeah. See, guys, if the college superhero kids are getting educated, what are you doing?
Well,
Why
they
are
weren't
you
really
not
getting
getting educated?
But they weren't really getting educated, but yeah, we'll let you guys watch that and decide for yourselves.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, again, I really have nothing this week besides the cycle of poverty. And yeah, I mean, it's a rough world we live in,
Yeah,
but we can make the best out of it. And I hope you guys make the best out of it.
agreed.
Thank you for tuning into the Third
Third
Perspective
perspective. Thank you
podcast.
guys. Have a nice day.